Thanksgiving has always been a weird holiday for me, kind of like sitting through a rerun of a show where everyone knows their lines, except you're the extra who doesn't get a script. My name's Lucas, I'm 32 now, but this story starts last November, a few months after I sold my second tech startup. It was the kind of sale that gets whispered about in Silicon Valley cafes, 7 figures, quiet NDAs, a handshake that felt like the universe finally nodding in your direction. But at my parents' house, none of that seemed to matter. My dad, Gerald, has always had a clear favorite, my older brother Ryan. Tall, charming, Ivy League business grad with the kind of laugh that makes rooms pause. He was the varsity quarterback and family golden boy, and I was the computer whiz who never really got people. I was used to being the background character in our family gatherings. But that Thanksgiving, that one left a bruise. I pulled into my parents' driveway right on time. Their house looked the same as it always had. White shutters, American flag on the porch, and Mom's ceramic turkey on the windowsill. I brought a bottle of nice red, the kind that needed decanting. My parents don't drink much, but I was trying, you know? I was trying to be the son who doesn't just send checks for birthdays or skip phone calls because he's knee-deep in code. The table was set with 10-place settings. The whole extended family was there. 2 cousins, an aunt who always smelled like lavender and said wildly inappropriate things, and Ryan with his fiancée, who looked like she stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Everyone had a place card, neatly written, gold-trimmed, like always. I found mine at the far end of the table, next to the window draft and opposite the kitchen door. It didn't say Lucas. It said the other son. I stared at it. Literally stared. For a second I thought maybe it was a joke. Then I looked at Dad. He was already laughing, like he'd just landed the punchline. Mom giggled nervously, muttering something about Dad getting too creative this year. I forced a smile. My stomach dropped, but I sat down without saying a word. My cousin Olivia gave me a sympathetic glance, but no one said anything else. It was like I didn't have the right to be offended. Dinner went on with the usual small talk, but I barely tasted anything. I'd flown across the country for this, missed a potential partnership meeting just to show up. The turkey was dry, the conversation drier. Then, just before dessert, Dad stood up with a glass and tapped it with his fork. "Let's raise a toast," he said, clinking glass to glass. "To my firstborn, Ryan, who just closed on his new condo downtown, got engaged to this lovely lady here, and is taking his company public next spring." Everyone clapped. I did too. Quietly. He kept going. "Some kids just peak early, I guess." A few people chuckled. Then he turned to me, grinning. "And for Lucas," he reached under the table and handed me a gift-wrapped square. "This might help." It was a self-help book. I wish I was kidding. Something called Rebooting the Inner You. There was a post-it on the cover. "Heard this guy on a podcast. Might help you figure things out." I looked around. No one else looked shocked. I could feel my ears getting hot. My jaw clenched so tight I thought I might crack a tooth. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, smiled like it didn't matter, and tucked the book under my chair. I don't know if it was pride or pure restraint that kept me from standing up and walking out, but I stayed. Ate the damn pumpkin pie like everything was fine. Laughed at a few jokes. Then I left. 2 weeks later, I got an email from HR. We'd been hiring aggressively for our new project division, and I didn't personally vet every applicant anymore. But this one, I saw the name and had to read it twice. Gerald H. Whitman, my dad, applied for a mid-level operations role. Apparently, after his third small business failed, he'd been looking for more stable work. His resume was average, tons of managerial buzzwords, vague results, nothing solid. No mention of me, of course. Just a desperate man trying to re-enter the workforce at 61. I called HR and told them to flag it. Told them I'd handle the interview personally. The day of the interview, he walked into the building like he owned the place. I watched from the glass wall of the conference room as he adjusted his tie and told the receptionist his name. She smiled, offered him coffee, and gestured toward the room. He stepped in, saw me, and froze. It was just the two of us. He blinked, confused. "Lucas," I smiled. "Mr. Whitman, please have a seat." He hesitated, then sat slowly, still trying to process it. I didn't realize that I was the hiring manager. I asked, opening his resume. "Yeah, small world." He gave a nervous chuckle. "Well, I mean, I knew you worked here. Just didn't expect that I'd be in charge," I finished for him, "or that you'd be walking into my company." He cleared his throat. I didn't think you'd amount to anything. I smiled wider. Yeah, I've heard that one before. He shifted in his seat. Lucas, come on. Let's not make this awkward. I looked him straight in the eye. Oh, I think we passed awkward at the other sun. And then I leaned back, clasped my hands, and said the one thing I'd been waiting years to say. That's when the door opened, and someone else walked in. My assistant, holding a folder marked Internal Review, Whitman Application. Inside was everything. Every insult, every backhanded compliment. The audio from that Thanksgiving toast, thanks to a cousin who had posted it on Instagram. My assistant set the folder down, nodded to me, and walked out. I slid it across the table to my father. Before we continue, I just want to make sure you've read your performance review. He didn't even touch the folder, just stared at me like he'd never seen me before. He didn't say a word at first, just sat there, frozen, like someone had cut the wires to his spine. His mouth opened slightly, then shut again. I don't think he even looked at the folder. His eyes flicked between me and the glass walls like he was trying to find an exit hatch that didn't exist. For a moment, I actually felt a twinge of guilt, just a flicker. This was my dad, after all. The man who used to drive me to chess tournaments, who once stayed up all night helping me build a volcano for the school science fair. But that flicker disappeared the second I remembered the toast. The place card. The years of condescension dressed as parenting. I didn't come here for charity, he said finally, voice low. Good, I replied, leaning forward. Because you're not getting any. His posture stiffened. I've managed teams. Built businesses. You think I'm not qualified? I tapped the folder. You managed 3 businesses into bankruptcy. Your last team left in under 6 months. And you still think QuickBooks Mastery is a competitive edge in 2024. I tilted my head. No, Dad. You're not qualified. But that's not really the issue, is it? He glared. You're enjoying this. I didn't deny it. Because I was. Not in the petty, vindictive way he probably assumed, but in the cathartic, full circle kind of way. The kind of satisfaction that only comes after years of quietly swallowing every jab, every backhanded compliment, every time he introduced me as the one who works with computers or something. This isn't about revenge, I said finally. It's about closure. He snorted. Closure? Lucas, don't play therapist. You think sitting behind a glass desk and throwing fancy titles around makes you better than me? No, I said softly. But it does mean I finally don't need your approval. That shut him up. There was a long silence. Outside the conference room, a few employees passed by, glancing in, then quickly looking away. He didn't notice. He was too busy trying to find the right words, some combination of pride and guilt and authority that used to work on me. But the balance had shifted, and he knew it. I didn't mean for that Thanksgiving to go the way it did, he said eventually, more defensive than apologetic. That's funny, I said, because I don't remember you saying anything after. Not a call, not a message. Just a thank you note to Ryan's fiancée for her cranberry stuffing. He winced. I didn't think it bothered you. I smiled without warmth. That's the problem, isn't it? His jaw clenched. You've always been too sensitive. No, I said calmly. I just stopped pretending it didn't hurt. There was another pause. Then, for the first time in my life, my father looked at me, not with judgment or disappointment, but with something I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was discomfort. Maybe it was the slow realization that the son he'd overlooked for decades now held the pin over his future. Or maybe it was just the cold slap of consequence. I closed the folder. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady. I'm not going to approve your application. Not because of what you did, but because of who you are. And that's not bitterness talking, that's policy. We don't hire people with your track record, regardless of their last name. His eyes narrowed. You're punishing me. No, I said. I'm holding you to the same standards I've held myself to every day since I left home. The difference is, I had to meet those standards. You just expected to be handed a pass. He stood up then, too quickly, the chair scraping harshly against the tile. You're going to regret this. I stood too calmly. I've regretted a lot of things. Staying quiet. Dimming myself down to fit into your idea of who I should be. Wasting years trying to prove I was worth your time. I stepped closer, not angry, just done. But this is the first decision I know I'll sleep well on. He stood there, breathing hard. For a second, I thought he might say something real. But instead, he straightened his tie and walked out without another word. No goodbye. No apology. Just silence and the echo of shoes on tile. I sat back down, closed the folder, took a long breath. Later that day, HR asked me what to do with his application. I told them to file it under conflict of interest, closed. But the story doesn't quite end there. Because a few days later, my mother called. She never called me directly unless it was someone's birthday or she needed help with her laptop. But this time, her voice was tight, worried. "I don't know what happened," she said. "But your father's been quiet. Really quiet." I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't sure if I should feel triumphant or just hollow. After all, this wasn't some internet fairy tale. This was real life. And revenge, even when served ice cold in a conference room, never tastes quite as sweet as you think. That night, I sat alone in my condo, staring at the unopened copy of Rebooting the Interview that I'd kept out of spite. I almost threw it away. But instead, I placed it on my bookshelf, spine out. A reminder, not of him, but of me. Because no matter how the rest of the family wanted to frame it, no matter how many toasts or labels they threw around, that Thanksgiving marked something permanent. I wasn't the other son anymore. And no one, would ever forget it again. The fallout came slowly, like dust settling after a storm. At first, it was quiet. A couple of passive-aggressive texts from Ryan, "He's our dad, man. Don't you think that was a little harsh?" Followed by complete radio silence when I didn't respond. Then came the group chat messages from Mom, trying to soften the edges. "We're a family, Lucas. Families go through things." As if a lifetime of being sidelined and disrespected could be summed up with things. I muted the chat. I wasn't ready to pretend nothing happened. What really struck me, though, was how quickly the rest of the family circled the wagons, not around Dad, but around the narrative. It was easier to say I overreacted than to admit he'd been cruel. Easier to label me dramatic than to reckon with decades of subtle cruelty. I heard from my cousin Olivia a week later. She was the only one who really reached out and asked how I was without trying to guilt-trip me. "You were right," she texted. "It's about time someone stood up to him." That meant more than she probably realized. Because growing up, no one ever stood up to Dad. He was the patriarch, the loudest voice at the dinner table, the one everyone danced around to keep the peace. But peace isn't peace if it comes at the cost of one person's dignity. Then, about 3 weeks after the interview, something unexpected happened. HR forwarded me an anonymous tip. Just a simple message, and signed, "You might want to double-check your dad's LinkedIn. Looks like he's still claiming to be executive director at your company." I stared at the email for a full minute. I hadn't thought to check. Why would I? But sure enough, I pulled up his profile, and there it was, bold as daylight. My jaw tightened. I scrolled down, and there were posts. Bragging posts. Him sharing articles about leadership and innovation, tagging my company, claiming to be part of driving the next wave of success. I could barely believe the audacity. The same man who couldn't look me in the eye during the interview was now using my company's name like it was his badge of honor. I could feel the blood rushing to my face, not from rage, but from the sheer disbelief. He was leveraging my success to build himself back up, hoping no one would dig too deep. That night, I didn't sleep. I just paced my apartment, flipping through every memory I'd buried. The birthday he forgot because Ryan had a soccer tournament. The graduation dinner where he said, "Summa cum laude?" Yeah, but Ryan got into Wharton. The time he introduced me to a family friend as our little tech guy, does something with websites, I think. And now this. This wasn't just about one Thanksgiving. This wasn't even just about the fake job title. This was about a man who had built his identity on belittling mine until he needed it to survive. The next morning, I called legal. Not HR, legal. We drafted a cease and desist. It was professional, clean, airtight. No emotion. Just facts. You are not, and have never been, employed by this company. Remove all public references or face legal action. We also contacted LinkedIn to report the fraudulent information. But I didn't send it right away. Instead, I printed out the letter, slid it into a plain envelope, and drove to my parents' house. It was a Sunday afternoon. I hadn't been back since Thanksgiving. As I pulled into the driveway, I half expected the porch lights to flicker like some haunted memory was coming back to life. I rang the doorbell. Mom opened it, surprised. She looked older than I remembered. Tired. "Lucas," she said softly. "Are you? Do you want to come in?" "I won't be long," I replied. She stepped aside. Dad was sitting in his recliner, TV on low, football game playing. He looked up, startled. "Lucas." I walked over, handed him the envelope. Thought I'd deliver this in person. He opened it slowly, like he already knew what was inside. His eyes scanned the letter. His jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. I gave you a chance to walk away with dignity, I said quietly. To just let things be. But you couldn't help yourself, could you? He still didn't say anything. I'm not a prop in your redemption arc, I added. And I'm not a stepping stone for you to crawl back into relevance. That finally got a reaction. I wasn't, he began, but I held up a hand. Stop. Just stop. I paused. You spent my entire life telling me who I'm not. Not driven enough. Not sociable enough. Not Ryan. And now, suddenly, I'm worth aligning with because you need me. But the thing is, Dad, I don't need you anymore. I haven't for a long time. He stared at me, a flicker of something in his eyes, shame, maybe, or just fear of being irrelevant. I turned to go. Lucas, Mom said softly as I reached the door. He's still your father. I looked at her, then back at him. No, I said quietly. He was my father. Now he's just a man with a folder full of consequences. And I left. I didn't hear from him after that. The LinkedIn page was scrubbed clean within 48 hours. No apology, no explanation. Just silence. And that was fine. Because closure doesn't always come with fireworks or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it comes in the form of an empty profile and a silence you no longer fear. The holidays came and went. I didn't go back for Christmas. I spent it with friends who felt more like family anyway, people who toasted me without caveats, who didn't need a label to show me where I stood. And somewhere along the way, I realized something important. I wasn't just reclaiming my identity. I was rewriting it. Not as the other son, not as the background character, but as the man who finally took the pen back and told his own story. A few months passed. Life, as it always does, moved on. My company expanded into a new market, and I was traveling more. New hires, investor meetings, late-night strategy sessions over cold coffee. It was everything I used to dream about back in college when I was building prototypes in my dorm room while Ryan was out partying. And now that dream was real, tangible, mine. But as the days stacked up and winter turned to spring, something strange started happening. I expected silence from my parents, sure, but what I didn't expect was how light I felt. It was as if the weight I'd been carrying for decades, the one I couldn't even name until I'd finally set it down, had vanished. No more trying to impress a man who never clapped when I won, only when Ryan did. No more family dinners that felt like job interviews I was always failing. No more chasing the approval of someone who thought I was only useful when I could be used. I wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly. Just done. One Saturday in March, I got an unexpected call. It was Olivia, my cousin. Hey, she said. You're not going to like this, but you should probably hear it from me. My stomach dropped slightly. What's going on? They're throwing Dad a retirement party. Your dad? Big backyard thing. Balloons, banners, the whole deal. Ryan's flying in with Amanda. And they've been telling everyone you're coming. I blinked. I never said I was. I know. But your mom's been telling people you'll make an appearance. Like it's some kind of family reunion. Everyone's acting like nothing happened. There it was again. The rewrite. The selective memory. The reshaping of events so the narrative made sense for them. My dad didn't fake a job title. He volunteered in a consulting capacity. He didn't call me the other son. He was just joking. It was all just one big misunderstanding to sweep under the rug. But I wasn't going back under that rug. Thanks for the heads up, I told Olivia. You're not going, right? She asked. I didn't answer. Because I had a better idea. A few days later, I emailed Amanda, Ryan's fiancée. We'd only spoken a handful of times, but she'd always been polite, and more importantly, perceptive. She was the kind of person who noticed things others missed. And she replied immediately. Absolutely. Let's set it up. Quietly. So here's what I did. The day of the retirement party, the backyard was decked out like a corporate gala. White tents, gold streamers, one of those "Congrats, Gerald" banners strung across the fence. Everyone was dressed like they were auditioning for a country club ad. My mom had outdone herself with the catering. Mini quiches, tiny shrimp cocktails, those weird fancy napkins folded like swans. And yes, my dad was in his element. Standing tall in the center of it all, glass of sparkling cider in hand, telling old stories to people who nodded like they hadn't heard them 100 times before. I waited until the toast. Ryan stood up first, tapped his glass, and began the speech. Polished, rehearsed, the kind of speech you give a man like our father. He talked about a lifetime of leadership, setting the bar, and raising sons who reflect his values. I nearly choked. Then, like clockwork, my dad raised his glass. To family, he said, and a legacy. especially to my boys, Ryan. And he paused just long enough for that tension to return. Lucas, he said, as if it was an afterthought or a concession. Even though he couldn't make it today, we're proud of him, wherever he is. The crowd clapped. The music resumed. And that's when the screen turned on. There was a portable projector set up on the lawn for a planned slideshow, photos from Dad's career, nostalgic moments, stuff like that. But Amanda had helped me swap in a different file. She gave me the time, the cue. The screen lit up, and the first thing that appeared was the company logo. My company. Then, a LinkedIn profile screenshot, my father's, with the fake job title bold and center. Then, a red highlight box circling Executive Director, Strategy Division. The guests went quiet. Another slide, the cease and desist letter. His full name. Company header. Legal watermark. Statement of misrepresentation. And finally, a photo of me taken from a Forbes article I'd been featured in the month before. The headline read, "This founder said no to a toxic past and built a tech empire on his own terms." The last slide? A simple quote. Sometimes, the people who belittle your worth are the first to claim your success. Then the screen went black. No sound. No applause. I wasn't there. Not in person. But I watched it all unfold via Amanda's quiet live stream, just a discreet phone in her lap. My father's face went pale. His jaw twitched. He didn't speak. Ryan stood frozen, not quite sure whether to defend him or walk away. My mom started whispering to a neighbor, trying to spin it as taken out of context. But the silence from the crowd said it all. The emperor had no clothes. And this time, no one pretended not to see it. Amanda shut off the stream. I sent her a quick thank you. Then I turned off my phone. I spent the rest of the evening on my balcony, sipping a scotch I'd been saving. The city skyline buzzed in the distance. A warm breeze tugged at the corner of the Forbes magazine on my coffee table. It was open to the profile they'd run on me. The first line read, "Some men are born into legacy. Others build their own from the ground up." That night, I slept deeper than I had in years. And in the weeks that followed, something curious happened. The group chat went quiet. Then, slowly, people started reaching out, not to pull me back into the fold, but to apologize. Cousins, aunts, even my mom. Not everyone, of course. Ryan stayed silent. My dad never reached out. But the tone had changed. I wasn't the other son anymore. I was the son who said enough. The one who didn't play the game, who didn't fake the smiles, who didn't let someone else write the final chapter of my story. A few months later, I got a letter. Not an email. A real letter. From my dad. It wasn't long. Just a few lines, in his rigid, all-caps handwriting. "You were right. I didn't see you. Not the way I should have. I don't expect forgiveness. But I am proud of you, whether you believe it or not." There was no return address. Just his name at the bottom. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because I didn't need to. I had already said everything I needed to say. Not with words. Not with speeches. But with choices. With boundaries. With truth. Because the greatest revenge isn't humiliation. It's evolution. And I had evolved into someone I never thought I'd get to be. Seen. Respected. Free.